This is Timothy Gordon. Spring is nearly here, and accordingly, we're opening up 2 new sections of classes for the spring: Church History and Rules for Retrogrades. Church History is a repeat course from the fall. It was so successful that many people could not get in and want to in the spring. Rules for Retrogrades is a new course based on my book with my brother, Community Organizing from the Right. Go to timothyjgordon.com for information. Also at timothyjgordon.com, a pre-recorded Catholic Republic course on sale. Greetings, parish orphans and retrogrades. Tim Gordon here with my wife, Steph, and we're actually going to be talking about Catholic marriage today in a more serious way because we did a video on it once or twice within the last year. People loved it, but they wanted us to, tool it up by saying, what happens when things go suboptimal or really suboptimal? Isn't that what people were telling us, Stephanie?
Yeah, we've done, it's funny because every time you do these sorts of videos, you never know specifically like how people are going to respond, especially with us, because we're pretty big on the anti-feminism kick. So we get a lot of hate, a lot of love, but a lot of people wrote, really, well-meaning Catholics wrote, and they said, yeah, we loved your marriage video, but, there's lots of situations out there where a marriage isn't really functioning the way you were portraying it ought to, function on your video. So, we kind of wanted to take a time out and address some of those things today.
Yeah, like, hey, we're flesh and blood. We get what the ideal is. The ideal is the ideal, but no one's living out some perfect storybook life, are they? These are the comments. And so what do we do to remediate our marriage? It might need a little bit of work. Other people wrote and said, what do I need to do to remediate my marriage? It needs a ton of work. I'll just give a quick plug. Steph's book, Ask Your Husband, is now in and going to press at Tan Books. Great book. It's an amazing book. It's got a special sort of flair of what the feminists call the feminine genius. It's mainly written to the ladies, right? It's amazing. Some of its sections go through and do FAQs for just this kind of thing, what we're doing here today. I just thought it's best because people always like when I bring Steph on and, give a little plug for the book and show a little bit of what it does. My book, The Case for Patriarchy, is now also going to press. It's got more approach to males, by and for males. And so you're going to get a little bit of the his and hers. But really, her book focuses on this, and it's amazing. Ask Your Husband. I really excited. Tried
to, when writing the book, it is focused on women, particularly wives, women's issues, Catholic wives. I think it's funny. It'll be like the 12th feminism book coming out from the Gordon clans or whatever. I tried to focus on things and issues that Catholic women have, and like this video we're doing today, addressing what is the ideal, and also when we fall short from the ideal, and how to kind of bring us as close back to the ideal as possible. So it really is. I tried to make it useful to not just people who are in very good marriages, but also to Catholic women who are in marriages that aren't functioning very well at the moment.
It also serves well, I think, to start out saying that the ideal is possible. And, in the era of the Francis pontificate, we're used to the kind of talk that goes, the sacraments aren't a prize for the perfect. They're medicine for the weak, for the imperfect, which he's implying is like everyone. He's implying, and to some extent, we are all sinners. But he's implying, like a Protestant, that remediation and slow perfection, be perfect the way our Father in heaven is perfect, Jesus instructed us, is not possible. And it really is. Now, people that know Steph and I know that we're best friends. It's going to be a recurring theme throughout the day. You can't fake this. You have to be in love with your wife. You have to like your wife more than anybody else out there. And I'm truly a grateful man when I say that's my situation. Same thing with your kids, by the way. JP2 emphasized the cross-fertilization of the rapport with a husband's wife and a husband's kids. I love my kids and I really like my kids a lot too. They're the 4 things you need to have a happy life. Love your wife, like your wife, love your kids, like your kids. And it sounds like some postmodern distinction, but it's not, because lots of good Catholics, faithful Catholics are out there saying, I love my wife, I love my kids, but I need time with the guys. It's important if you can get it, time with the guys. But what they really mean is they need an excess of time
away
with
from
the
their
guys.
wives.
You got time away from their wives, time away from their kids. I can honestly say, for all of my many flaws, that, you know, being best friends with your spouse, and this is not precluded, it is required by the fact that I am my spouse's boss. Being best friends is key to our happiness, right? Can we honestly say that? People hang out with us and they're like, wow, you guys are bringing it real.
I think a lot of people, when they hear us talk about feminism in particular, you know, the woman being subject to the man, they have this notion that our marriage is like a dictatorship and unhappy or whatever. And it's quite the opposite. And it's quite funny when those sorts of accusations come out about us, because all of our friends and people who know us personally, who've spent a lot of time with us, come right out of the woodwork and they're like, oh, they get more defensive than we do about that sort of thing. Like, oh, they're like the nicest couple. Again, like we all have our faults and individual shortcomings, but one of the things I am the most proud of is my marriage. And I think, you know, transitioning into our talk today, marriages require a lot of work, even among best friends, and a lot of attention to detail and just constant assessment, just to keep things fresh and keep things good and evergreen between you and your spouse. And I think a lot of people get lazy about it, and, you know, they kind of fall off the side of the boat, I guess, and just don't really pay attention to the health of their marriage. Yeah,
and to keep the maritime analogy running strong.
Or boat analogies.
When neither of us are boats people, but it does well to say that if you're asleep at the helm for longer, if you've been a lazy ass for longer about tending to the most important aspect of your life, your marriage, then you're going to have to course correct more arduously. You're going to have to turn that wheel, and it's going to feel harder. If you do it a little bit every day, the way Steph is a famous cleaner, you know, as you're talking to her, she doesn't lose a beat. She's a great conversationalist, but she's scrubbing, spot cleaning, you know, getting diarrhea out of diapers, things like that, without missing it. It's amazing. People are amazed, even other mothers. So if you don't do it that style, to each his own, whatever, but you're going to have a much harder task in course correcting. And I'll just say this, because when people read my book, Case for Patriarchy, it's going to be a big deal. And I'm just telling you right now, it's going to be a big deal. When people read Ask Your Husband, you will know it is going to be a big deal. And even our friends who hadn't talked to us in a while will call up, it was a recent experience, and be like, I know what you guys are saying is actually all too precedented, all too well evidenced, and all too papered in the Catholic tradition, but isn't that just the ideal? This is my last sort of preemptive strike against this kind of distinction. The distinction that it's ideal, but it doesn't work in real life. Like, I've seen this work with certain trad families, and my dad was a tyrant, or my uncle was a tyrant, or my friend's dad was a tyrant. The man is the sovereign, right? And the thing is, when you see me talking to you on Rules for Retrogrades, most people think I seem like a laid back guy, except when I'm debating or when someone challenges a serious principle or talks smack about my family. I'm a pretty laid back guy. And I bring that to bear on my household. Like, within the Christian rules, we created our own little rules. So one of our friends was recently, it assuaged all her fears just to hear us say, like, hey, yeah, Steph helps me with everything I do. She's behind the camera half the time.
Sometimes audibly.
Audibly. Always audibly. That's what you do. So you help me. So, like, and you're an amazing cleaner. You're a great cook. Folding laundry. We gave our friend this example.
Let's just be honest, I am the worst.
You do not tend to it.
Ever.
But you come to me. How does it work? You come to me, you're like, I just am going to let this go. And then what we'll do is every so often, to catch you up, right? Yeah. We will just do a laundry folding party in front of movies. And it is a double movie party or whatever, 4 or 5 hours.
A Lord of the Rings marathon of laundry folding.
Literally. I mean,
we did like a good solid 8 hours.
Seriously, it's something like half of that. And that's the very point of one man and one woman united by Jesus in the sacrament is enough to make do. You can make your own little reality. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And if you get a good man, ladies, then he'll give you leniency where you want. That there's not a tension between the patriarchy, which Christian marriage is, and leniency, where the husband deigns it. And if he loves you, which is his duty, if he loves you unto death, then he'll be lenient on little things. But that doesn't mean that you're outstripping from his obedience. So my whole point in saying all this is because it was a conversation we had last week with one of our friends. The ideal does work out. It does work out because we get to, craft. We get to narrowly tailor our marriages in a way that works for us, helps us cope. Some of us are hypochondriacs. Others sweat through our shirts. Others of us, get very nervous about opening up PDFs. Actually, all of these are me.
Others of us get in trouble on Twitter by having a big mouth.
Right. We all have adaptive, unique situations that we need to deal with. I'm serious now.
Right.
And the patriarchy, this beautiful lower vocation of marriage, enables us to do that as we want. And that includes today's show will be more on the course correction aspect in even some really grave situations.
Right.
My point is showing that you can get back to the ideal, and the ideal is not diminished. It's not lessened by the fact that you can narrowly tailor all this to help you both cope with your crazy contingent lives. Everyone's got a life that requires some fudge. And we're going to show you how across some of these less than ideal situations, the patriarchy is built to last. It's built to sustain the fact that human beings sometimes fall asleep at the wheel, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 10 hours. You can still get back there. That's why we don't have divorce.
I like your clean as you go approach to marriage. I think that's very good. Yeah, sorry, we have show notes here on my phone.
Of course you do.
Down here.
Of course you like it because you're good at it, and it's your pump. Yeah, I mean, this is not, you are the ultimate clean as you go. And the great thing about one final plug for the clean as you go approach that Steph has mastered is it's not a bore. She doesn't want the guests to do it. She doesn't miss a beat in the conversation. She doesn't take long to do it. It's just like, oh, I didn't even notice you were cleaning the whole time. All our friends that hang out with us, including some of the brickheads who met up in Hattiesburg a couple weekends ago, they're all like, wow, Steph really does this stuff in real life.
The brickheads, by the way, are the Tim's online classes. A social group had been formed out of the student body, and they get together and they have we offer a social hour for all of his students for his classes, and they have called themselves the Brickheads. So they came to visit us here at our house a couple weekends ago. So that was super fun.
Quick plug for Real Estate for Life. Get yourself, if you live in a blue state, from the bluest of the blue states to the reddest of the red. That's what I did. Catholic balkanization and the grouping principle. Be around others who believe what you believe in, which is to say Jesus, hopefully Jesus in the sacraments. Right now here in Mississippi, what we share with our neighbors is Jesus. Got to evangelize the sacraments to most of these Baptists. But the point is you need to be around others with whom you share a res publica. That's what makes it a republic. Realestateforlife.org is a website that will help you do that. Get out of your blue state, get to a red state today. One more final plug before we jump into this. TimothyJGordon.com is the place where you can go and enroll your family for the new homeschoolers courses. We have 7 or 8 courses that are new in Retrograde Classical Academy. Of course, some of you took some of our adult courses, which were offered here and there over the last year. We are going to a full model, including Latin, algebra, the classes that homeschoolers want for their kids, but are intimidated to teach. That's opening in September. You can go there now and enroll for classes.
Many of you know we're homeschoolers. We have 6 kids, and it's very important to us. So we've really tried to open up the class roster to classes that a lot of people would find attractive. And again, we're hoping that it's kind of whoever wants to take the class can take the class. If you have a 13-year-old or you yourself want to touch up on algebra or Latin or whatever, then feel free to join. It's been really fun so far.
It's great fun.
Great. Wonderful.
Wonderful. It's a Pat Coffin throwback.
Well, let's move on to, of course, we're Catholics, and so there is no divorce. So even if you're in a troubled marriage, there is no divorce. You want to have a theological explanation of what we mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a funny lead off, but it's great to strike the bedrock first and say, here's the ceiling, right? The floor, rather, here's the floor. The ceiling is, I don't know, the sky's the limit, because you can have literally what we'll say is one 10th first comment for this video is, you can make your marriage as good as you want to make it.
Or as bad as you want to make it.
Or as bad. And that's what most people are too many people are remarking today. Like, we don't even know where the bedrock is. And we currently hear from bishops that talk as if there's such a thing as Catholic divorce. Many of the people in the pews next to us are on second or third marriages at church. So, forget talking about making our marriages the best they can be. We just need to know what to do with this catastrophic situation where we've been utterly abandoned trying. Well, there is no Catholic divorce, right? What God puts together, no man can put asunder. It's an addendum that Jesus makes to the Old Testament. You really can't have Catholic divorce, and that's why that's our teaching. An annulment, which in some dioceses is granted 100% of the time, which is a conversation that the Lord is going to have with the bishop on his judgment day. Annulments are not divorces. Annulments have nothing to do with divorce. All an annulment states is that this marriage, while it is appeared to be a marriage, it's been a legal fiction. All of the humans involved in it or witnesses to it were fooled. It was never a marriage. It was a false start or something like that. So the race that was ostensibly run after this false start does not count. You can't get a gold, silver, or bronze medal for this race because it never was begun.
They're just saying that basically, for whatever reason, the church is looking at a particular couple, and they're saying something happened in that relationship which basically rendered the whole thing null and void. Like, somebody was coerced or something like that. The church is basically saying that this was never a thing to begin with. So, and that's a process. That's not something just happens. And I think a lot of Catholics who are not really well versed in their faith aren't aware of the fact that it takes a bishop and a very long process for this to actually be adjudicated. This is not just something that the individual Catholic couple are like, annulment. I'm getting, that's it. My marriage is annulled. Like, this is a very long process, and it's not something that's just done lightly.
And it should be longer. Unfortunately, yeah. I think it's become too streamlined because in many dioceses and in many canonical jurisdictions, the canonists who are granting these things far too often are lending to the false appearance that annulment is just Catholic divorce. But most of you guys already know the distinction. But the point is that that divorce is not an option precisely for the boundary conditions upon which people who have extreme marriages might play to say that they're the very case that really should be granted a divorce. I'm talking about a wife whose husband begins using hard drugs, becomes physically abusive, dangerously so. Any abuse is obviously bodily dangerous, or something worse than even those two things that I can't think of now. Any of those boundary conditions still capture you, right? If when you got married as a Roman Catholic, you got married in a way that was not null and void, then it doesn't matter how bad the person you're married to becomes. You are tethered to them for life, and we're going to give you the playbook from there.
And and a lot of people have lots of questions about what Tim had just said about being tethered for life, even in extreme situations. So we'll take a moment to say that the church does, however, allow you to physically separate from a spouse who is being physically abusive to you or your children. There is evidence in canon and all that they state specifically you can leave physically the marital home if there's danger.
Yeah, obviously, for some people, this is actually necessary.
Yeah.
But the goal is always reunification. Always. I mean, now the goal is not always realizable. If your husband is a rascal and he is separated from you by necessity because he's posed a physical threat to you or the kids, I guess I'm addressing myself to a wife in such a situation, then yeah, you're always praying for his full conversion, for such a conversion that he goes from being, not quite a murderer, which, think about it, Saul of Tarsus was before he became St. Paul, but maybe physically violent, that you're afraid of something like murder. Well, you're always praying for his conversion, for both his good and your good. And here's why: because you're one flesh. Even with a physical separation, you remain one flesh.
And a lot of people we've known personally have had situations like this, and they've asked me or whatever in private, and they've said, well, okay, so we're physically separated, but nothing is changing. Like I'm praying for my spouse. I'm trying to keep, the children still respecting we'll use the husband being the abuser in this instance. We're trying to keep my children respecting their father and etc., but nothing is changing. One of the things that I've always told those sorts of women is that you are acting as a clarion call by your holiness and by your love for the sacrament, for your husband to return back to you and return back to the faith. So all the things that you're doing and all the suffering that you're undergoing right now is very purposive. It may feel like you're just kind of spinning your wheels and it's very lonely, but you, by your actions, are a constant reminder to your spouse that, to return to the home, to return to the things that God had called him to in the sacrament of marriage.
Yeah, he's the leader, but you can be the reminder in such a situation. It's absolutely real. Even in the hated, the feminist hated Catechism of Trent on the duties of husband and the duties of wife, which I cited, on Matt Fradd's show 2 summers ago, and it set all the world ablaze, the Catholic world ablaze anyway.
Some corners of the world are still burning because of that interview.
Feels like it. But even there, it quotes scripture, and it says, "A quiet man of the hidden heart can be chastened by his wife." And that passage, the only catechetical teaching in either of the 2 universal catechisms on the duties of husband and wife, because the new one doesn't take it up. It just presumes that the Roman Catechism still teaches of force on the matter. It makes it utterly clear, all too painfully clear for the would-be Christian feminists, if that were such a thing, that the husband's the leader. Joseph is the leader. Mary is not. Mary's the greater saint, but Joseph is the leader, and she had to do everything he said. She had to obey, and she did.
And this is another big part of the book, of my book. In my last chapter, I think it's called "The Leader Who Won't Lead," and I address a lot of these issues. And one of the issues is that we'll get women who write us and they'll say, "Oh, my husband is not being a leader, and I have to step up in his stead to take the children to mass, to lead them in their faith, to do the things that the husband is typically supposed to be doing." And they're just seeking advice. And one of the things I tell them always is to keep encouraging your husband, not nagging him or, belittling him. And we'll get to that in a second about belittling your spouse to the children and to strangers in general, which is so weird and creepy. But, you're just encouraging him to assume that mantle of the head of the household. And also women, it's very, very important. This is what we're leading to with that, is that you have to, you're stepping in for him at the time being, but if he does try to assume responsibility like he ought to and head the household, you need to willingly give that back to him. Those things that you were doing, the leadership roles that you were kind of taking over for your husband, you have to surrender back to your husband, and don't begrudge him for that, or don't have a big power struggle about him wanting to step up and take control again.
Which besets us on all sides today in the Christian world, not even just with Catholics, but Protestants as well, is there's a paucity of male leadership, particularly male priestliness in the home, taking the wife and kids to church. Mm-hmm. And so women have stepped up to the extent that it's possible and gotten the kids to church, which is admirable in a lot of situations. But here's the thing. This is not the fault of the wife who I'm about to address. You can't do an adequate job surrogating for your husband, just as he can't do an adequate job surrogating for you in terms of domesticity, right? A home is a home. You are endorsing transgenderism unless you acknowledge what I'm saying here. Our roles are non-fungible. One man, one woman, a bunch of love. They have to really like each other. They need the sacraments and the graces therefrom. And that makes a good life.
And it's so funny to me how women who are of the feminist mind, they're basically out there arguing that they are replaceable in the home. They're out there saying, "Oh no, anyone can replace me at home, but not at work. Oh no, I cannot be replaced at work." But at home, they're basically saying, "Yeah, I'm replaceable. Like anyone can do my job, a neighbor, a nanny, a friend, a family member, my husband." That's utter nonsense. Each one of you is so unique to the function of the household. And God created us so individually, the sexes, that we offer each different things, and the one cannot replace the other.
Yeah, the non-fungibility of the sexes, the early first wave feminists knew was a threat. It's called Christian complementarity. You can't say, well, I like complementarity, but I believe I can fill in for my husband and be the priest of the home, or that he can fill in for me. You can't. It's not your fault. You do the best you can if your husband refuses to go to mass, but you will not make it palatable to your children to go to mass or to receive the sacraments. The Pew Research Fund has the numbers on this, right? The attrition rate for marriage, the offspring's retention of their Catholicity is staggering. It's a huge attrition rate if the husband doesn't go to church, because the kids are looking to the priest to do what he can. Now, it's not 100%, but it's like 90%. Well, so you give it your best shot, wives, and if you can't, you can't. But it's on him. The final thing is that statistic shows if the husband goes to mass but the wife falls away, it does nothing to to lessen the rate of the children retaining the faith, which proves the husband's the priest of the household. You do your best if he won't come up to the ideal, but nevertheless, you can't replace him.
Yep, and give back when he does step up. You have to give back the reins, and if he's trying to do a better job. In general, if your spouse is trying to improve, even in, like we mentioned earlier, in like dire situations, like there's a pornography addiction, drug addiction, those things, if they're trying to improve, you need to be encouraging them for the sake of their soul and the fact that you are one flesh, and for the sake of your family to improve and to make the proper steps to better themselves.
Yeah, it's like a principle of government, right? Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Lord Acton said it. We fear big government for precisely this reason. We ought to fear what happens when the wife starts filling in for the husband, for the derelict husband. She likes the power. She gets a taste for the power. It's called ratchet effect, because it only goes one way under the ordinary course of human and lesser animal affairs. Animals don't give up power. Well, the good marriage, the healthy marriage, can course correct. It's the one thing under the sun that, through the grace of, human will, intellect, and the sacrament of matrimony, you can course correct, but you have to be very intentional about it. You have to be very intentional to say, if you're the wife with a derelict husband in the sacraments, or worse, we're talking about even worse situations than that here today. You have to be super intentional. Be like, I'm giving this power back, like Maximus wants to give Rome back the power to the people, or whatever. That's what a wife has to do in cases like this, because you are in the danger zone.
Speaking of danger zone, the next point we'd like to address is spouses bad-mouthing each other to their shared children or to strangers in general. I'll start off by addressing the children. I've had some experience in that, just from my own upbringing, but I can tell you that women in particular, mothers in particular, who are trying to, or in a difficult married situation, and try to use the children as a sounding board, or to seek advice from them, or to just in general complain, they seldom get the allies that they're looking for. And what I mean by that is that they're not understanding that the children, as bad as the father may be, still have a loyalty and a love for their father. And when the mother is bad-mouthing the father, she's bringing herself down to a low level in the children's eyes. And a lot of times, let's be honest, when that's happening, from what I've seen, the children will end up siding with the father, no matter how bad he is, if the mom's just back there bad mouthing the father the whole time. And of course, this goes for a father doing that about the mother as well. It just don't do that. Your children do not need to be. Older children, I understand, might be aware of what's going on. So this mainly pertains to the younger children. If older children are aware of like your marital difficulties and ask about that, the appropriate thing really is to do is to acknowledge, like, yes, your father and I are having some issues right now, but we are praying and we're looking to the Holy Family, and we're going to be working on our marriage because we love each other and we're one flesh, and leave them out of the details.
Yeah. I mean, you guys can take Steph's word for it. Some people that have met us in person, that we've gotten into deep conversations or whatever, start talking to Steph about this, because it's everywhere. The family is everywhere beset by the final attack by Satan. Sister Lucy wrote this to Cardinal Kafara in the early 80s, and he said in 2017, before he died, that we're now in that time. Final attack of Satan on the family. People talk to Steph, and they can't believe, some of the stories she tells from her own childhood, how bad divorce can get. And if you're thinking to yourself, I was from a pretty nasty divorce too, you have no clue. So looking at her now and admiring her, every day the way I am, I can't believe how bad the stories can get. And they happen to my wife of all people, but particularly given the grace and the natural kind of obedience and beauty and just friendship that I have in my life through you. And
it's interesting because I think a lot of people assume that maybe because I'm married to Tim, that I was a cradle Catholic, or, I had kind of a similar background to him. I did not at all. I didn't know anything about Catholicism before I met him. And a lot of the feminism ideas and things like that, I was very conservative when we met, and I was always very pro-life, but there, I had some bad ideas. And so a lot of this stuff I've really come through, the fullness of the faith through Tim, and then just living it and having the grace of the sacraments and really understanding, how both sides of the coin in my life have kind of worked with each other, and how rich I've of the faith we have, and all the things that I've learned from it.
Yeah. The point is, you've seen the worst of this, or among the worst of it, and the Christian ideal, the Catholic ideal of the sacrament really works.
And it's totally doable, right? Again, with work. You got to put work in your marriage.
Yeah.
But we'll go on and we'll talk too about not just talking badly about your spouse to your shared children, but the thing that I don't understand more than anything is the people who do that to complete strangers. And I was telling Tim recently, it's like we're Seinfeld fans. We love that show. And in the show, they have certain categories for people where they call somebody a low talker or a high talker. And it's just kind of funny things that people do socially. I always told Tim, I would have loved it if they would have had an episode called the spouse talker, where it's just the person gets around and they just gripe about their spouses. And I'm not even talking about big things. I'm just little passing comments like, oh, my husband doesn't do this, or my husband doesn't do that. Stop doing that. It's so icky. And no one, again, like your children, when you're doing that to your children, no third party hears you talking bad about your spouse and thinks cool. You're with it, or you're oh, she's got her head screwed on right, or anything. They just think why are you bringing me into your marital problems?
Look, if you do that, you sound like an idiot. You sound like a bitter, unpleasant moron who married the wrong person. This goes for men too. Everyone knows I'm not all about equality and saying men do everything women do wrong, or women do everything men do wrong. We're totally different. But this one is the same. You get around even church circles. I mean, you get around divorced couples or annulled or whatever. Obviously, those circles are rife with the backbiting. Everyone knows that. But I'm talking even at good trad parishes. You go to a men's group or a woman's group, married, and they literally they badmouth their spouses, and it's so disgusting.
Or make fun of them in a way where it's it's not. It's just, you just don't do that. You're people will never hear me say anything derogatory, mean, or inappropriate about Tim, and it's not because it's for obvious reason. It's also because he's my best friend and I love him, and it's like, why would I do that? Like, this is the most important relationship in my life. If you're out there projecting to people like, oh, my husband's so stupid, or my husband doesn't do this, or my husband doesn't do that, it just makes you look bad too. You look like you have bad choice in men,
right?
And that you don't have your life together. Now I'll go make a side note here. I understand there are situations where people, particularly women, feel like they need to seek advice of somebody they trust. I've been in this situation before where women have come to me, or I've gone to women and be like, hey, what can you give me some help with this problem we're having, or give me some fresh advice on this? There's also an appropriate way of doing that. And one of the rules of thumb I have, even when you're actually honestly seeking advice, you're not just trying to gripe about your husband. You're like, I have a question I have to ask, somebody I trust, is always pretend that your spouse, your husband, is sitting in the room with you as you're articulating your problem or characterizing it.
Or better yet, even ask them to be there with you. Like, hey, I mean, this, through the grace of God, this hasn't come up much with us where we're seeking outside advice. But I think in first year of marriage or something, it's like, can you come with me? Because I want to ask a third party. You could just sit there, but I want to make absolutely sure that I'm characterizing this fairly. I don't even have a specific idea in mind.
No, you just want to be guilty of the sin of detraction against your flesh, your one flesh. I mean, if you're having serious medical or marriage issues, it's completely understandable that you're looking for advice or encouragement or whatever, but please look for people who will give that to you and who won't just allow it to devolve into a gossip session or a complaint session about your spouse. If good friends, and I have been in this situation before where I've gotten the impression that a friend was kind of using me more like a gossip buddy about their spouse, I've had to take a step back and be like, no. Your loyalty is first and foremost to your husband. And I'm happy to offer encouragement or help or advice in ways that I'm proficient in, but I don't want to hear like negativity about your spouse. And frankly, a lot of that stuff, I don't even have the right to know. I don't have right to know those sorts of details. So please be careful, not just to your children, not just to strangers, but to your friends and your confidants, how you're talking about your spouse. You should be comfortable saying whatever you're saying to them in front of your husband or wife.
You know how one can tell that one of those is coming at you, the secret gossip? Because they'll always say not to gossip. Not to gossip. But it's like, okay, that disclaimer has no binding legal force. If you're needing to say to a third party not to gossip about my husband or wife, but you probably shouldn't be saying it. With all due respect is another one. It's like, look, my favorite thing about what you said, Stevie, is there's a public and a private component to why it's vile for men to say really bad stuff about their wives under the heading of like men bonding or vice versa.
Right. Yeah.
And I've heard some odious stuff. Privately, this is your best friend. So like, look, me and you are buddies. We might drink beers after work. We might play basketball together, pick up basketball. We might actually be a little closer than that. But you and I, compared to one another, compared to my relationship with my wife, are like strangers. This is my best friend. There's no daylight. There is no daylight between us. I tell her everything. I've had to tell other Catholic podcasts. They say, oh, keep this strictly between us. I'm like, look, man, I won't tell anyone outside of my wife.
Everything he knows, I know.
Right, because there's no daylight. Think of the course correcting that we're talking about with the shit. For one thing, you just need stuff to talk about as husband and wife, and it doesn't count as gossip because you're one flesh. So it's like, look, you tell me something, if it's interesting, it's going straight here. She's my best friend. Like, get that, dig it, like absorb it, digest it. So for one thing, when someone's gossiping about their friends, it's the apotheosis of the old adage, he who gossips with you gossips about you. It's like, dude, if you will gossip to me about your spouse, you will stab your mother or your best friend, ostensibly otherwise, in the back. So that's the private reason. you just look like a moron. You look like a D-bag. You sound like a bitter goon.
And
that's
what sort of
what
image are you trying to put out in the world? We're called to portray marriage, especially Catholic marriage, in a very positive light, to encourage more people to come into Catholic marriage. And what are you doing out there? Like, you're talking bad about your spouse. You're just sending the message in a culture that's fertile to dismiss marriage in general. You're basically out there just adding fuel to that fire by saying, who would want to get married? This guy is over here like complaining about his wife. Like, why if I'm like a young single secular guy, like, and I'm hearing some Catholic guy talk about that, it's like, first off, that doesn't like bring me into the faith or make me even interested in the slightest about Catholicism, but even more so for marriage.
Which is precisely the public component of the message you send to the world when you badmouth your husband or wife. It's like, okay, not only are you privately knifing your best friend in the back, but you're like pissing on the ashes of what was once great Western civilizational central sacrament, matrimony.
And another thing on the support kick is that I think it's very important for surrounding friends, family members, and, you know, just whoever is in this couple's life. If there's a woman in particular in your community who's been abandoned by her husband, we all need to rally around those women and help them financially. And even like, you know, we've been in situations before, Tim and I were like, okay, you know, this woman's husband isn't in the picture. Like, when you don't have a man around the house, there are certain chores and things that need to be done that, you know, men around her friends' husbands can really lend a hand and help out. Even employers, Catholic employers, like giving a woman, you know, like we've talked about before, like women under certain normal circumstances should not be working, married women. But there are circumstances where they have to, like if a husband runs off, like you have to feed your kids. So a woman in that case has to go to work. And in that instance, you know, Catholic employers in particular need to be mindful of their time schedules and having flexibility with them as well. In general, just supporting these women who are abandoned and not looked after by their husbands is very important. And I don't think a lot of people really talk about that very much.
Right. Yeah. Everyone asks me for the umpteenth time, hey, do you think that it's a guilty sin that I stopped giving money to my parish? Absolutely no. Like newsflash, no. Most of us don't have great parishes we're going to. But that money can be tithed elsewhere and should be. And one of the great sources for that tithing, one of the great recipients, beneficiaries, ought to be this archetype of woman in our midst, someone who has been abandoned by their husband. You know some, I know some, we all know some. They just need money a lot of times, right? Because now they've been abandoned by their husband and they're not widows, because we're praying for the reunification of the body, the head, the husband, with its member, the wife, the head and the heart, St. Paul other places calls it. But until that happens, she's living a lot like a widow, the woman. And guess what? This is one of the original purposes of the helpers in the church. The deacons in the church would help to gather food and money for widows.
And even muscle, like, you know, like if I don't have Tim around the house with me, it's like I would need, you know, somebody to help me like figure certain things out around the house. Something breaks or lifting things up, you know, things like that. Like just checking in with these women, making sure they have everything that they need, not just like emotional support or prayers, but actually lending your time and money if you have it to help these women until their house can be
not going to do it.
Irreplaceable. It's just very important. Like I've been meaning to actually, and I mentioned this in my book as well. Like they need more support than just, you know, a listening ear or good advice, but actually physical help and financial help as well.
On the other hand, be careful, because Lucifer's crafty. And so married men, or even if you're a single man and you happen to live in the neighborhood of a woman that's basically been abandoned by her spouse, the devil's really, really shrewd. He's very shrewd. And so obviously, if you are surrogating for the husband around the house, natural affections will spring up if you allow them to. So it's got to be, hey, here's a basket of food that my wife made because now you're going to work, which you shouldn't have to because you're You're not allowed to in ordinary circumstances because you're a Christian wife, but you can't cook because you're working, replacing the husband, and you create this chain of deficits that runs all the way up to the top. Here's a basket of food, and my wife mentioned that you needed, this short list of to-do tasks done. I'm going to do them real fast, and I'm going to be out of your hair. We're praying for you. God love you. You gotta get in and out. You can't allow, kind of like we said in the last section, under the auspices of something good. In that section, it was seeking remediation from a third party. That can easily become gossip, very easily become gossip. This can very easily become an occasion for sin, because men and women are, guess what, guys? Women are weak physically, men are strong. Women are receptive, men are expressive. Women are passive, men are active. And the same things that attracted that poor woman to her actual husband and your wife to you actually attracts all women to men and men to women. The activity attracts the passivity attracts the activity. So you gotta, if you're gonna help out, or even like if we have female guests to our house, I'll walk them to their car, but I'm not walking that close to the girl. We have a night to the woman or whatever. This came up a couple weekends ago. It's like you walk out there, I always shoot a couple baskets in my driveway or something as I'm going out there. You don't want the kind of intimacy that would mimic, and naturally so, the kind of intimacy that springs up between man and wife. So you got to be aware of that. But we all do have to be on the lookout for this archetype of woman who's doing her damnedest. She's doing her best, when she's been left by her husband. And a lot of men have been left by women too. And these guys need help of another sort, but not altogether different.
Yeah, so, cooking for there's a man in the situation cooking for them. Women in the neighborhood babysitting. A lot of times like that, they're going to need that. They're going to need because a lot of times they're also workers and they have responsibilities to provide for their children. Like it's just trying to fill where you can, helping these people get through their daily grind. Another thing that we're going to address too, we've gotten a lot of emails about this particular topic.
Oh yeah, just totally discrete bullet point. Yeah, a lot of these are like, boom. These are all when you're saying another thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. No. When you're saying another thing, like this is a whole other bullet point. These are not add extras. We're trying to respond line item to all of these. So I think this is like a line item 8. We should number them, or because when we say, "Oh, it's just another thing," it sounds like we're whatever. Like these are
another shrimp on the Barbie.
Yes, throw another shrimp on the Barbie. These are Barbie shrimps that we're trying to address specifically because there's so much need. All of these different shrimps, all of your different barbecues. Yeah, so
all of your shrimps are important to us.
To our barbecue.
Yeah. So another shrimp that a lot of people are reluctant to talk about, but we've actually received quite a bit of emails about after our other marriage video, is that when there is a sexual problem in the marriage, and a lot of time this comes from trauma from either spouse, from like past sexual abuse or something of that nature. I'll start off by saying, if you're already somebody who's single and foresees that becoming a problem in your marriage because you were sexually abused or there's something going on that you were traumatized by, seek help now, because what happens is that when you become married, those things, especially sexually, tend to exacerbate and become a bigger issue. So again, I think there's a lot of shame for people who they have that sort of issue going on in their marriage and they don't know how to address it. Do we go to a priest? Do I go to friends and family? Like, who do I talk to about this issue? It's very important for
Sorry
both.
To laugh.
It's both. You have to have a sense of humor about everything. It's very important for you to be very communicative with your spouse about like your sexual issues, because what often happens is that if you're close-lipped about it and you're just kind of trying to ignore the issue, your spouse is probably interpreting that in a way that's a negative on themselves. You're probably saying, "Oh, it's because I'm bad, or I'm deficient, or my wife doesn't love me," or whatever. They'll fill in the blank, and usually put that blame on themselves. If you're upfront and you say, "Hey, listen, I've had this sort of situation in my past. I have this particular trauma." Being with intimacy, then you guys can work together with that, and it doesn't become like a huge dividing force in a marriage.
So one addendum that I would make that I think is important no, not a correction per se, but it's not an idiosyncratic interpretation by the spouse. Hold on, I got to go back one point further up. What we're calling sexual trauma is any marriage comprised of either or both spouses who have any previous sexual partners. Does that sound like far too great a number in society? Yes. It doesn't just mean the most heinous instances of child molestation from your youth. That's more outlier. We're talking sexual trauma as anyone with any past. This especially affects females who are especially sensitive to it. They feel bad about because it's a good thing to feel bad, but you don't want to beat yourself up. They feel bad about prior sexual experiences. And what it does, again, Satan is much, 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 much more clever than we are.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to be a good wife in their marriage. It necessarily gets into the fabric of the marriage, the marital act, sex, and messes it up. The glue, it's natural and supernatural glue for healthy Christian matrimonies is the marital act. That's the church's term for it, right? So you see a wife and a husband that are strong and look like they're good friends, it's because of the marital act and the blessings and the graces that stem from it. Okay, the reason I said that we don't want to talk about, usually this comes up with husbands who are usually reacting to wives as kind of having they might have this idiosyncratic sensitive response. You weren't even, not that you were bad mouthing him.
No,
but you know you weren't at all. That's not the important part.
Right, yeah.
The important part is it's the only message transmitted by a wife who is feeling, because of sexual trauma, is feeling unexpressive
or uncomfortable expressing herself that way.
Yeah, diminutive in the bedroom. That is the message that's sent. It is a message of halt. It is a message of rejection, much as the way we discuss contraception is an unmistakable no. It's, I don't want what you give.
Women are probably saying like, I don't feel comfortable. And in their mind, they're expressing to their husband like, oh, I'm not feeling comfortable. This has anything to do with you. Men are interpreting this as it has something to do with me, so
or even if it doesn't have to do with me, so we don't psychologize, the message is one of halt. It's halting. Yeah. And that will destroy a marriage.
Yes.
And it's, but this is so common. Everyone has past sexual experiences. I know. This is why marriage is failing everywhere, right? Half of marriages actually end in divorce, and the other half are being corroded from the inside out by this trapping of feminism.
You could just tell the marriages now are just not intimate. And I don't even mean in a sexual sense. I mean just writ large. We have bad-mouthing spouses, complaining. People are just far too comfortable airing their non-intimacy with their spouses, which has alerted Tim and Maya's attention because we care greatly about promoting Catholic marriage. And we're saying, okay, how could we help people address these issues and work on their marriages so that they're good for each other and for their children, which then helps society and the promotion of our faith, Catholicism.
But I guess it's becoming a major part of this apostolate, this whatever ministry. But no, that is sexual though. Yeah. Steffi. That is sexual to say like, oh, you could tell that this couple, they're not really holding hands. They're not really laughing at each other's joke. I saw a mini eye roll at this Catholic dinner when he told a joke, and instead of laughing at his joke, or vice versa, but usually it's the wife with the husband in this instance, she kind of rolled her eyes. That's all sexual. I mean, I'm not going Freudian on you guys, but everything is sexual between a man and a wife. The fundamental act which characterizes the rapport between a man and wife is sex. It's called the marital act. And if this is not healthy, and it is very hard for it to be healthy in any couple where there's any sexual trauma, you already heard how I defined it, it's a high bar, then the whole marriage will be cattywampus. And so now, can you course correct? Of course. Yeah. That's what we're doing here. But you got to talk about it. All Steph you were saying is, you got to talk about it and be like, look, it's not just that this isn't you. I have my own stuff that I'm dealing with, but I'm going to get better. We're going to strengthen our friendship and our sexual friendship or whatever, for lack of a better term. And there will be a mutual cross-fertilization between our friendship and our sexual friendship getting stronger. And let's communicate. Let's spitball this. Let's have a little skull session. What do you need? This is why even though it's a little awkward to the not so cheeky Catholics out there that giggle every time you say titmouse, right? We have to talk about it this way, and it's not just an excuse to talk body for a second.
Right.
Sex is really important. Marital sex is really important. It has two goals, two teloses, procreation, but also the good and the unification of the spouses. And I'm sorry, guys, I hate to be gross. I hate to be the one to say it. But I can tell that a bunch of Catholic sex lives, when I go to these boring ass dinner parties, with passive aggressive spouses, going both ways, men and women.
There's a lot of sexual tension in the room.
Yeah.
I think is what you're trying to say.
If you're not laughing at each other's jokes, if you're not, I'm not talking about you went to a dinner party once after your biggest fight ever. That doesn't mean you have an underwriting problem. But if you're not normally going to these things and just kind of, we'll be polite to everyone else, but you're my best friend in the room, you're holding hands under the table,
And I would even suffer like a couple who's a little bit more like PDA leading than a couple who's like complaining about each other, like at every opportunity. Like you're asking them to pass the biscuits, and then the woman would say something like, "Oh, biscuits. Somebody over here eats too many biscuits." It's just like,
did you pass the bacon? I would if Jim would bring it home.
And again, okay, I'll take a sidebar real quick and just say this, like, because people have heard us say that before. They're like, "Oh, so you never like correct your husband, Stephanie?" I have never and will never. Let me be very clear. I will never and will never correct this guy in public ever. Now, privately, behind closed doors, there's a nice and there's a wifely, loving way of doing that. And of every wife, of course, or husband to his wife, even though the husband more often, because they're the head of the household, is dealing in correction, usually more than the wife does. But it's like, or it should more than the wife. Wife will have to take her husband aside and be like, "Oh, I think we should do this way, and maybe we could do better on this, or you could do better on this, that, or the other way." But that's done privately. That is not done at dinner parties or at church functions or Christmas morning, or like there are ways to do this where you're not coming across as miserable in your marriage or just airing that laundry to everyone.
Yeah, where you're not honestly sharing how miserable you are in your marriage, right? I mean, in some ways you could just say this stuff, and I wish everyone out there had gotten a chance to know at least you, because you practice what you preach. And it's like, I mean, every once in a while we'll have a fight, but it is amazing when all a man wants is, a loving helpmate that'll help him do what he's doing, not laugh at him, except when he's trying to tell a joke, and just be there for him, like the ribs to protect the heart.
Right.
And when men get that, they're very powerful. And when women have a man that loves them fiercely and would never, ever join in the guys when they're all talking smack about their wives. Like when you have that kind of confidence, like, sorry guys, I'm going to peace out on y'all. I'm not into that. It makes you look like a cuck, like a bitter cuck to talk about your wife. But more important than what it makes you look like, it actually betrays a reality that you're not that tightly tied to your own flesh. This is the other half of my flesh. Mm-hmm. There's no daylight. I just wish I could express that more fully. And it's not that we're great. It's just we're married and we take it seriously. And
you have to course correct. Clean as you go, I guess, is what we were saying. You have to clean as you go type of thing. You see, oh, we're not doing so great on this, and we have to do better. And the conversation shouldn't be that long. If they are, then you do it. You go about it the best and most respectful way possible. I guess we'll close by saying that there's a lot of women out there that I've met that are in really bad situations with their husbands, and they've just been incredible. And a lot of the things that we're talking about today, they've done actually the opposite, where they're just very holy women, like showing the world like how to be in these sorts of bad relationships, where they are constantly praying for their spouse and trying to send little notes of encouragement to kind of get back on the holy path. And I've corresponded with many of you out there that are in those situations. Again, well done. That's very, very difficult to do. I've been very blessed in my marriage. I can't imagine what that must be like to be in that situation and, have to keep up that sort of standard for yourself, but it is definitely worth it. And your suffering is purposive, and it is sanctifying you and leading you to Christ.
Yeah, remember that I'm glad you said that. The whole point of this is it's our vocation. We, the many who don't choose the higher route of the priestly ordination or religious life in general, this is how we get to heaven. If you're a husband whose wife ran out on you or vice versa, you can still get to heaven that way. You're actually suffering extra here. You're probably getting rid of purgatory if you follow the rules.
Yeah.
Can't start dating someone else. Can't stop praying for your spouse. Can't take to bitterness. You have to take the high road, and God bless you. And what you absolutely deserve is all of our hand, money, elbow grease, some childcare, cooking, cleaning, whatever you need. The people in your church, in your community, hopefully even just your neighborhood, even though that's not Catholic specific, should be there for you.
Yeah.
That's what you are owed. You're not owed an ear of someone to tell you, to talk to you like there aren't two sides to every story. Because there are.
And you're not owed happiness. None of us are owed happiness. Sometimes there's the saints' lives are riddled with those saints who suffered their whole lives, but they translated their suffering to holiness. I mean, in a totally random example, like our daughter who's got severe disabilities, like she suffers, probably every day, but her suffering is purposive. Her suffering is sanctifying her and frankly our family. And that's the thing. Like, these women are in these situations. Not only are you sanctifying yourself by handling this situation the way Christ expects of you, but you're also handing that sanctification off to your children if they ever have situations like that, or they're watching their mother go through that, or their father. Again, this could be either way, but also society, and your friends and your family and people who or know of your situation, and they're watching you conduct yourself. Your suffering is purposive. Like you are working towards Christ, even through your unhappiness.
You're a holy sign of contradiction.
Yeah.
Like St. Helen, or Constantine's mother, or St. Monica, Augustine's mother. They were women from less than perfect marriages, since that's the term of the day.
Yeah.
God bless you guys. Take strength, take heart, be tough, keep your head on a swivel, Deus Vult, keep believing, particularly women whose husbands have left, or vice versa. You're feeling abandoned, you're feeling low, you're feeling embarrassed and mortified. You're feeling like a parish orphan. All of us feel like that in almost all ways, except for that one. You share a unique suffering, but there are others like you. And all of us are parish orphans in the sense that it is a trying time, and we need to band together. And I mean, people with different household situations in the ways we've described here today, we need to band together and help one another out. And remember, the ultimate lay path to happiness is by remediating our fallen marital situation. None of us are perfect. We can all struggle and strive, even if we never reach that goal, to get to a happy marriage where you're, soteriologically, amicably, sexually, a sign and an actual source of comfort and strength to your spouse. That's what a happy marriage is made of. It's the path to heaven. Go read Sirach book. Is it 15 or 25? I forget what it is. So good wives versus bad wives. It's based. So God bless you guys. Did you have a parting shot?
Yeah, I would just say, any of you single Catholics out there, the most important decision of your life will be who you pick as your spouse. So please, I implore you, pick correctly. And don't marry a feminist, or a male feminist, for you ladies.
Yeah. God bless you guys.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is.
If you like this video and my other work, please consider supporting me on Patreon page or at timothyjgordon.com.